Hey everybody, welcome back to our neck of the woods. So if you're here for truck content and diesel content, I'm learning probably as much as all of you are. So we're adding in some depth right now, but I want to talk a little bit about what else we have to add on this truck, what we have to maintain, and why do we have to do all of this. All right, so first thing first, diesel trucks and diesel cars, etc., they end up actually polluting a lot more than just your regular gasoline cars. Now, the reason why that is going back all the way to like my organic chemistry back in college. Basically, fuel and all petroleum products in the world are made of hydrocarbons. What's a hydrocarbon? Simple. It's literally just a carbon molecule surrounded on all four sides with a hydrogen molecule. And inside of crude oil is basically every hydrocarbon that you can think of, starting all the way down to just one single carbon, which would be methane, down to basically just dozens and dozens and dozens of carbon molecules that get longer and longer. So we all know what methane is. That is literally the smallest form of hydrocarbon. It's a gas, it's what you fart, it's what can light really easy, and it's what really stinks really bad. But the longer you go down in those hydrocarbons, the heavier and thicker they get. So for example, within the first 10, you've got methane, ethane, propane, butane, pentane, hexane, heptane, octane, nonane, and decane. And that's all I can remember. Not bad for like 15 years ago. But the longer and longer you get down the list, you start getting thicker and thicker and heavier. So as you mentioned, or probably recognize the first 4 of those or so, like butane and propane, well, those are gases in the air. But if we can press them and put them into liquid form under high pressure, they become liquefied and they're in liquid form until you release them into the atmosphere, and then it's a gas. So for example, a butane lighter, if you throw it down on the ground, it explodes and all of the gas releases. If you've ever shot a propane tank or released propane out into the atmosphere, it instantly goes from liquid to gas. It is very, very cold, but it goes up into a gas form and just disappears. Now, one other thing you might have recognized that I said was octane. In a gasoline-powered car, octane is very important. Because octane is 8 hydrocarbons long, it does not explode as easily as, let's say, propane does. So in a gasoline-powered car, whether it be either one of these that's supercharged, naturally aspirated, or even in a lawnmower, under high compression and high heat, if you don't have enough octane, it can get compressed and pre-detonate and cause engine knock and eventually can destroy your engine. So in a high horsepowered, like turbocharged or supercharged car, you want more octane because that means that you can end up running more boost, meaning you can put more air into the engine, meaning you can add more fuel, and you can even advance the ignition timing to get you more and more horsepower. But if you do not have that octane in there and you put in a lower octane fuel, before you even get to the top of your compression stroke, it'll basically pre-ignite, pushing back down on the piston before the piston ever had a chance to go up. Again, you will get engine knock and you will explode. So octane is a good thing. However, diesel fuel is not as volatile. Diesel fuel, you can actually, not recommended, but you can throw it on a fire. Yes, it will make the fire grow bigger, but it doesn't explode like gasoline does. Gasoline fumes and vapors can explode. They're very dangerous.
Now kids, don't try this at home.
Diesel being much longer of hydrocarbons, it is a lot harder for it to burn. So because of that, on most vehicles, you don't even have spark plugs, you have glow plugs. But during the combustion process, you get a lot more nasty stuff when you burn it. So on a gasoline powered car, one of your biggest things that you have to worry about is carbon monoxide. Well, when carbon monoxide gets burned up and it goes out through the exhaust, a catalytic converter can simply take care of the carbon monoxide, turn it into carbon dioxide and basically water vapor, and then out through the tailpipes you have a much cleaner, more environmentally friendly exhaust. Unfortunately, with diesel, there's a lot more additives and stuff inside of that fuel, and with the hydrocarbons being much longer, when it initially burns, the first thing that you get is just an absolute ton of smoke and black soot. I'm sure we've all seen a diesel-powered semi on the highway. It doesn't have its exhaust system on properly, or it's running too rich, and it just lets out a huge, nasty black plume of smoke. That is soot. Soot is bad because if you breathe that in, there's different sizes of soot and particles, and soot is small enough down into the process that if you were to breathe that in, it can get into your lungs. It can even cross your lung blood barrier and even your brain blood barrier and get in, and it's a carcinogen. It is just not good stuff to be breathing in. So the first thing that a diesel truck or a diesel car has to worry about is how do you catch that soot? That's not something that we have to worry about on a regular car, although even on a regular car, it's still not as clean as you would think it would be. There's still obviously some dirt and debris that comes out through that. There's still some unburnt fuel sometimes, and even on these also. But again, it's much worse in a diesel car that if I were to rub my finger on the inside of the exhaust manifold like I just did there, it would just be absolutely black caked on with how heavy the soot is that happens during the combustion process. Now, another problem with diesel is not only does it produce carbon monoxide, but it also produces some nitric oxides. Those are very, very bad. We all know back in the day, cars without catalytic converters, if you were stuck in a garage, for example, or even if you had an exhaust leak and you were sleeping in your car, that would be very, very bad. You could get carbon monoxide poisoning and basically just go into a forever sleep. Well, adding nitric oxides onto that also, not very healthy for you. I'm pretty sure you would take a forever sleep a lot quicker with breathing in both of those at the exact same time. So to combat all of that nastiness from the beginning of the combustion cycle all the way out the tailpipe, the first thing, at least on the Rams, what they do is on the passenger side of the engine, they actually take some of the exhaust fumes out of the turbo and manifold, and they actually route it right back into the intake cycle. So not a good thing if you want to do horsepower or a clean engine that lasts forever, or if you want to have good fuel economy, because you know on a high horsepower track car, the only thing that engine wants is cold, cool air and the best gasoline that you can put into it. Well, on this car or on this diesel powered engine, we literally are bringing some of the exhaust fumes up through basically a cooler here, because not only is that exhaust fumes extremely hot and we have to find a way to cool it down through this cooler right in through here, which basically has engine coolant running through there, so the temperature drops down. It then runs through basically this exhaust pipe here. It goes all the way around to the front of the engine, and then on the other side of the throttle body, through this ERG valve right here, it then gets blown down inside of the engine. Now, why do they do that? Well, it's because not all of the fuel gets burnt up in through the compression cycle or the combustion cycle. So some of that gets rerouted back down into the engine to get re-burned up again. And apparently the EPA says it's a lot more environmentally friendly. So that's the first thing that on this Cummins that they try and do, is by basically continuously recirculating your nasty exhaust fumes. But it's not all the time, because this is an exhaust valve regeneration valve or something. That's why it says ERG. But basically that is only opening and closing when the engine says, hey, you got to open and close and we're going to recirculate some of this stuff. Now, the next thing that we try to combat on this truck is what's called the DPF filter, or the diesel particulate filter. And what its job is, it's just a big old basically catch can that's under there that captures all of the soot. That's its only job. The soot gets captured in that DPF filter, and over time the engine will see how much that filter is basically filling up. Then it will go through what's called an active regen, and that is basically using some of your diesel fuel to spray into the exhaust in front of the filter because soot is very easy to get rid of. The soot is basically like a charcoal brick that you would put on your grill when you're grilling out in the middle of summer. And when you put flame to it, they burn up and then the charcoal brick is no more. So if you can get the exhaust and that DPF filter to get hot enough, basically you can burn off all of the soot and completely get rid of it. Now again, you can go through an active regen. When that completely fills up, it'll send exhaust fuel or diesel fuel down into it. It will heat that thing up to over like 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, and all of the soot will be burned away and it will be pushed out the exhaust basically in the form of either smoke or in the form of like ash. Another way to get rid of it, however, is through a passive regen. And that would be basically you going up hills, going on the highway, towing something really heavy. Because even though you are going to be using more exhaust or more fuel, and you're going to be making more soot because you are towing heavy or towing a load up a hill, etc., that exhaust is going to be hot enough because it's under more stress and strain that it's basically going to do a passive regen, and as much soot as you're making, you're basically burning it off almost instantly, and again sending it out the tailpipe. So basically the harder you run your truck, you should have less regens. When you sit and idle and you're just putzing around town a little bit and your exhaust is never getting up to temperature, that's when you're gonna have more regens. You're gonna be wasting more diesel fuel because it has to go through an active regen instead of a passive. And then you're gonna see your mile per gallon really drop. So basically, if you are gonna have one, you basically need to drive it and you need to use it. So it's more economical for you and you're saving on fuel, etc. Now, the other parts of the exhaust to where we're talking about basically the DEF fluid or the DEF fluid or the DEF. It's not fluid, I know I keep saying it. But the second part is the reason why you put DEF into your vehicle is you next basically have 2 more filters in the exhaust or 2 more catalysts in the exhaust. One I think is called an SCS, and then I think on the Cummins there's even another one, or it's like a muffler. I have to look into that. But the point of it is DEF basically is just consisted of water at 67.5% and 32.5% of urea. And the point of the DEF fluid is in the next filter, on the SCS filter, another injector that sprays this stuff again at certain times. And when you have the burnt up soot, etc., go through that and the carbon monoxide and nitrous oxides, basically through that catalyst, it binds with the urea and it basically, again, turns it back into or converts it to basically carbon dioxide and water vapor again. So I understand the point of trying to get all of that exhaust to be super, super clean and to be healthier for the environment, etc. But I know people are gonna be like, dude, just delete it. Delete everything. Get rid of the ERG and get rid of all of this stuff. Get rid of the DPF filter, get rid of all that. Tune the engine appropriately so you're not producing a lot of soot and you're not producing a lot of smoke. Because on a diesel car, you can actually run very, very high air-fuel ratios. On a race car or on a track car or something with high horsepower again, when you're full wide open throttle, you may have an air-fuel ratio as low as like 10-1, depending on who your tuner is. You may be around like 11, 12-1, etc. When you're just putzing around town, you're gonna be about 14-1. But on a diesel powered car, you can have as high as 60-1. You attract attention, and that's when cops and everyone basically are gonna crack down and get you. So if you can tune the car to be a lot less running rich, then you're not gonna be rolling coal. But again, yes, I understand it's good for the environment to leave everything on, but I also understand that a lot of people wanna get rid of it because they want their engine to last forever, they want more horsepower, and they just don't wanna deal with all of the sensors and features and everything up here that can break, the DPF that eventually will clog, even though it goes into a passive or active regen. Yes, you can burn off all of the soot, but unfortunately, you cannot burn off ash. Ash eventually will clog the DPF. I've been told it's somewhere around 100,000 miles. We already have 58,000 miles on the truck, so there's a point that our DPF filter could be limited on its lifespan here. And then of course, you've got the injector for the diesel, you've got the injector for the DEF. Now to interrupt real quick, a little caveat on your DEF. Couple things here. Number one, this stuff goes bad fast. Some say as early as 6 months. So when you're looking at your stamps on here, these numbers are kind of funny to read, but I guess this is saying the expiration date is 2024. So that would be your first two numbers here. That will be your year. So first two numbers are year. The next three numbers are the date or the days in the year in which it was produced. So I don't know why it doesn't say 23/139, but it says 24/139. So apparently this was made 139th day, but in 23. So I guess most of these manufacturers say that it will only last 1 year. So this would expire 2024 on the 139th day. But if you really want to do good, try to keep this stuff under 6 months. Just make sure you're looking at that. Another thing, make sure you're getting this API certification. That's a third-party certification, knowing that your DEF is actually good and it's been tested to be like real and true. And then also don't buy it from the pump. There's too much water in that in the winter time, if any of that water or urea goes bad, it can crystallize, it can evaporate if you take the lid off and you don't use it right away. So just be very careful with what you're using and how you're using it. Wait until you get down to maybe like a quarter of a tank, buy a 2.5 gallon and throw it in there and then be done with it. The stuff that's at the pump, you have no idea how long it's been sitting there. It can go bad. Again, if you look at the nozzle of the pump, all the water's evaporated, so there's nothing but like crystals all over it of urea. And if you're throwing that down in there, you will clog your injector or you'll break your pump and you'll be thousands of dollars out. I watched a diesel guy like this guy right here. He had a 3500 and at 2200 miles on one trip that he made, the thing already was gonna be sent into a very hard limp mode because he got some crap DEF at a truck stop. So don't do that, just buy that stuff. And then I don't think I mentioned the way that stuff gets used. Obviously, the more you run your truck and the harder you run your truck, the more DEF you end up using. So even though you're saving on diesel fuel by not having it go into active regen constantly, well, you're gonna be using more DEF. Well, if you didn't have DEF, you would be using more diesel fuel to go into regens by trying to keep the DPF filter clean. So you're basically screwed no matter what you do. But I did buy that for like $21. Blue makes a platinum at almost like $28, which is ridiculous. And then I was at the store today buying some lumber for the house and I found some API certified stuff that was only $8. So holy crap, what a difference in all those prices. All of the sensors on that entire exhaust system, there's like 10 or 15 that can all break. And if you're left on the side of the road and your truck's down, if you do use your truck for work constantly, if your truck's down for 2 or 3 months, especially on the last few years when COVID hit and there's just no parts available, then man, do I feel bad for you guys. So it is completely not legal in the United States at all to touch anything on here. There are possibly some tuners coming out to at least get you a better tune than what the factory has, but basically you leave everything on it. So there are some things that we have to think about if I am gonna touch anything, or one day am I gonna get stranded on the side of the road and having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars if something were to break and I have to replace those components. Now, one other component that I might wanna get rid of here, the factory elbow here on the other side of the throttle body, basically underneath of that elbow is a grid heater. That grid heater can fail also. And there's a little sensor back in there that apparently on some of the older trucks, I don't know if it's as prevalent on the newer ones, but there's a little sensor in there for the grid heater like relay. That thing has an internal stud and nut, and apparently that can break off over time. And when it drops down in, you basically just dropped a nut and a bolt down inside of the engine and the engine will explode and it's done. Well, I do have a 100,000 mile warranty on this truck or 6 years. So if that does happen, I get a brand new free motor. But a lot of people will go ahead and put an aftermarket elbow on here where the grid heater relay is basically relocated and it has a whole new design. So basically you don't have to worry about that. It's not a cheap fix to put on, It is something that I am thinking about doing. It will increase some airflow. It gets rid of the grid heater down inside of the elbow that basically blocks airflow and opens the mouth way up. So you should maybe get a little bit of horsepower. You maybe will get a little bit of mile per gallon increasing. And even, I think they even said like better throttle response. So that is something that I may be looking into. And it is 100% carb legal. So replacing that and getting rid of that failure point, there's no worry that we're doing anything illegal. But then we just have to find out if there is tuning software that can tune an emissions compliant vehicle, but we do gain horsepower and mile per gallon and all of that good fun stuff. Now, I am still learning probably as much as you guys. If you're here for the content and you're trying to figure out what all of this stuff is, I'm still learning as much as you guys. This is only stuff that I've been looking at over the last 2 months. So I know there are people way more educated out there than me, but at least I think that I have the basics down. So at least on the Cummins turbo diesels, again, we've got that heater over there on the other side for the exhaust. We've got the grid heater on this side. We've got the DPF filter to worry about. We got the SCS filter to worry about. We've got, again, fuel injector down there. We've got the DEF injector down there. And basically, we're just neutering the crap out of this thing that we can't even hear the turbo wind up. And it's just not as fun as what I think that it could be. So I guess I'm gonna do a little bit more research and stuff, figure out what I wanna do on this guy. If you guys got any suggestions, let me know down below if there are some parts and manufacturers of stuff that I should be looking at. And again, we're gonna be back with some videos here shortly. Again, looking at the Carfax that I got on this thing, it looks like only oil changes were done, and it looks like only tire rotations were done. So we do need to get some new tires on this thing before winter hits. These things are looking pretty bald, and from the year of these things, these look to be original. So I can't believe somebody actually made it almost 60,000 miles on the factory set of tires. That's pretty impressive. But we need to get a lot more fluids and stuff changed. So I will be back when those parts arrive. We'll be back on basically a part 3 of this. We got the crankcase filter that's due at about 75,000 miles. So we'll go ahead and swap that out. And again, because this has the ISN transmission, it has to be changed out and filter every 30,000 miles. And I have no indication that it was ever done. So the next video will probably do that. We'll probably do the transmission service, and we'll probably do the crank ventilation filter up top here, and we'll swap those out for you guys. So until next time, if you learned anything, hit the thumbs up. If you got anything to say, message me down below. And we'll be back when we do our first service on this thing, and then we'll go from there. So until next time, take care.